Welcome to the Embryo Adoption Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Mellinger. On this show, we explore the possibilities embryo adoption offers to families often struggling with infertility, though not always. Through insightful interviews and moving stories, we uncover the blessings of this unique path to parenthood. This podcast is brought to you by the National Embryo Donation Center, giving hope to those longing to grow their families. Now, let's get started.
So good to have you with us for the Embryo Adoption Podcast. And before we get started, if this show has been helpful to you, don't forget, share, rate, review, subscribe, give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Those mean so much and help people find us via the algorithms. So I will thank you in advance for that. And you have a real treat today. We have an author and his family with us. They are an NEDC family, Ezekiel and Rachel Lee, as well as their son Ian, who just turned a year old. Ezekiel has come up with a tremendously helpful resource. It's a new book called Once Frozen, Now Family, How to Pursue Embryo Adoption, and How 7 Families Did It. We're going to talk about the book for most of this podcast, but I want to start our time together by giving you a look at Ian, those of you who are watching the video version, and the entire family, in addition to Ezekiel. His wife, Rachel, is here. So good to have you all here. Tell me real briefly about your journey to Ian. I know it's almost nap time for him, so we wanted to have him at the beginning of the podcast.
Yeah.
Right. You want me to start?
I can start, and then
Rachel,
you can fill in. Very good.
I'm more fuzzy on the dates. So we started trying for a baby, I guess it was about 7 years ago. And at that time we were, I think, in our late 20s, and maybe it was hubris, but we thought it would be pretty easy, and it wasn't. And the years kind of just accumulated, and we were prayerful about things. We had family members, well-intentioned, who said, why don't you do IVF? And we weren't ethically on board with that. I can unpack that later if necessary, but we didn't feel that was right for us to pursue. And so we kind of held it with an open hand and continued praying about things. And then one summer, I was speaking with my mom, and my parents are from Taiwan, and she mentioned having heard about embryo adoption on a radio program. And the conversation was in Chinese. We usually speak in Chinese. And I thought she was talking about IVF. And so I just kind of wrote it off, and I didn't think much about it. But then she brought it up again. And so I thought, okay, I'll do my due diligence and I'll look into it. And then I looked into it, and we were very intrigued. And so we looked into the process, and the more we looked into it, the more we saw it as a somewhat novel, but perfectly legitimate form of adoption. And so it was complicated in terms of sorting through our the state of our heart, our motivations. Were we viewing this as a fertility treatment or as a form of adoption? We wanted to view it properly. We didn't want to just preempt God, if you will, because we do believe that at the end of the day, God is the giver of life and the opener of the womb. And so we didn't want to preempt him. And yet, as we prayed about things, we sensed through that process of prayer and consulting with our pastor and family members, and also looking in the word, we came to the conviction that this was a legitimate form of adoption. We were going forward by faith. And so we pursued it. And then a few transfers later, we were thankfully able to bring this one into the world from the freezer. And so here he is with us, and very curious about the touchpad, it seems.
He is. Yeah, those of you who are watching by video can see how curious little Ian is. As I mentioned, he just turned a year old. It's about time for his nap, but we're so glad he joined us at the beginning of this podcast with Rachel. So Rachel, sum it up for me. What's it been like having God bring you this young man that you thought might never happen?
Yeah, it's It's honestly, I think I'm still processing it.
Ugh.
Like, I think because we felt like we waited for so long, and then in an instant, it's like all that changes and that season of your life is behind you. And I think I'm still really just settling into the reality that I'm like his mom. Like, I think it's still like the terminology and the relationship is something that I'm still like, I don't know, getting used to, for lack of a better way of putting it. And so I think it's just been kind of a whirlwind of changes to not just like emotionally, relationally, but also just in terms of the structure of like my day and the rhythms of day to day. And like, just, it's just all pervading, you know, what this one person does to your life. And so I think I'm still getting used to that. I think I'm still getting used to just how he's invaded, I guess, for lack of a better way of describing it, like our very existence. And so, yeah,
You're talking, and that's completely right. I mean, you know, every time you have your first baby, people tell you, oh, life will never be the same, and you know, you take it in, but you really just think, oh, well, you know, it's been the two of us, and but you know, we'll be able to handle this. We'll add another, and we'll just go along, and that'll be the three of us.
right.
No, it's like it's like a time bomb has gone off when you have kids. That's how much your life changes.
Right. So,
And you're having another one, by the way. I should say this, and not via embryo adoption. Congratulations.
right. Thank you. Yeah, that's,
I mean, it's amazing. So you struggled for so long. You have Ian through embryo adoption, and now you've naturally conceived his little sibling, right?
right.
The doctors never really did give us a clear answer as to why we couldn't conceive naturally. We were just diagnosed with unexplained infertility, that wonderfully ambiguous term. And so we did get checked out, and the doctors didn't find anything too out of the ordinary. And so it was just kind of like, don't know. And so we just pursued embryo adoption, and then continued to have an open hand as to how the Lord would work. And I did mention to Rachel a number of times, I said, you know, it'd be so neat if we had children through different means, like not just embryo adoption, but also through the natural means. And we'd pray about it, and then just give it back to God, give that longing back to God. And lo and behold, actually a couple weeks before we were going to reinitiate the adoption process, we found out. And so
Amazing.
It's been amazing. It's been overwhelming. It's been exciting. It's been many things, you know, but overall, I think we're increasingly excited and definitely grateful that God saw fit to grant us this second child.
And when is she or he coming? When's the new arrival?
End of July, late July.
Do you know what you're having?
No.
It's going to be a primal surprise.
Well, here's what I'll say. Whatever you're feeding Ian, keep doing it with your second kid. He looks like he's very healthy.
Yeah.
Very robust.
Yes,
Yes.
he's adorable. Congratulations to you guys. And Rachel, hey, if you need to slide off and make nap time happen for him, it's fine. Or you can stay with us. Doesn't matter.
I will pop off. I might come back on.
Okay.
What you need from me.
You're totally allowed to do that. We are extremely flexible, so it's no problem for us. So yeah, Ezekiel, okay, so we'll get to the book. I mean,
yeah, sure.
Who's this book for? What gaps did you want to fill?
Yeah. What I was thinking about this all along. I mentioned to you that my father and I actually went on a long road trip transporting our stuff, but over the course of those 3 days, I was thinking a lot about this interview and like, what am I going to share? What am I going to talk about? So in terms of what inspired the book, there are a few things. One was I actually read a book prior to writing this book about multilingual families and how different multilingual families ended up essentially teaching their children different languages. And so it might be that mom is responsible for Spanish, dad is responsible for Italian. and then maybe the ambient language is English. And so looking at essentially different case studies of families that have done this thing and taught their children 2, 3, sometimes 4 languages. And what was really inspiring about this book was, I think, just seeing that it could be done, because I speak Chinese and Japanese to Ian. Rachel speaks English to him. And so I wanted kind of inspiration about that, because you don't really see that much around you, but then you read these stories and you see, oh, it's doable. Other families have done it, right? And so what I wanted to do was to write a book that featured vignettes of different stories, different families from different backgrounds, to inspire the reader to see, oh, I can do it too. That you don't have to be from this particular SES, for example. You don't have to be from this particular background or this age. There certainly are older couples who do it. There are younger couples who do it. There are couples who had biological children who then did it. And so what I wanted to do was to show the reader it's doable, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is, when we were learning about embryo adoption, I am someone who likes to find the book, so to speak. I'm not saying my book is the book, but if I want to learn about, say, like farming, then I want to read a book about farming, like a single volume that's sort of like a how-to, right? Mm-hmm. Or if I'm reading a book about Chinese grammar, then I want to find some grammar text that in, say, 300 pages explains to you succinctly, in general, the nature of, I don't know, Chinese syntax or something like that, right? And so I was looking for a book like that and I didn't find it. What I found instead was a lot of information in piecemeal form. So Rachel and I watched a bunch of YouTube videos. We read a bunch of blog posts. We actually reached out to a couple who'd been interviewed by you. And we gathered our information that way, which took time and which was very informative, but I always felt during that process that I would have loved to just sit down with a book, 2-3 hours, read this thing, and have an understanding overall of what it's about. And so I didn't encounter such a book. And the other thing I wanted to do in relation to filling the gap in the literature, if you will, was kind of, for lack of a better term, like complicate the story a little bit. I'm not an ethicist. I don't pretend to be an ethicist, but I think those of us who care a lot about the sanctity of life know that there are a lot of issues upstream of embryo adoption in the IVF industry. And I'll just leave it at that for now.
Correct.
And so I think it's very easy to just talk about embryo adoption in this happy way, right? To kind of focus on Polaroid moments and to focus on the post of things, right? Like, we welcome this child into the world, and it is a wonderful thing, and it is worth celebrating, and life is always worth celebrating. And at the same time, I wanted to complicate things a little bit by maybe shedding light, by illuminating the situation upstream that results in this, so that families can see it more holistically, how the industry has brought about the need for this form of adoption. So I want to celebrate the adoption for itself, but I also want, I think, for especially us as Christians, to think more carefully about the decisions we're making as regards life, how we're speaking about life, how we are treating life, how we are legislating life. And so I really wanted to be able to do that through this book as well.
Well, and I think you've done it. You've done a great job. The book, again, is called Once Frozen, Now Family, How to Pursue Embryo Adoption, How 7 Families Did It. So just so you, our podcast listeners, know, it's not just testimonials. That's what Ezekiel is sort of getting at here. Yes, you hear from those 7 families, and that's illuminating. But some of the chapters have varied formats too. There really is a very good how-to at the beginning if you want to go through a particular process to do embryo adoption, and that sort of gets at the one-stop how should I do this, that he talked about. There's an interview with our own president, Dr. Jeffrey Keenan, about some of the ethical issues that you mentioned, as well as how our program works. There is an interview with our friends at Snowflakes about how their program works and some of those. So I really think that this book, which is available again, Once Frozen Now Family. It's available anywhere. It's available, at all the typical bookstores online that you would think of, your Amazon.coms, BarnesandNoble.com. It does the trick. It's readable. It is not too long. You can sit down with it for 2 or 3 hours, and I think you have a really good handle from a Christian perspective on embryo adoption and the milieu that surrounds it. So I think you've done great work here.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, and thank you for mentioning the first half of the book, which is the how-to part. I wanted to structure it that way so that those who are not familiar with the logistical side of things could get an overview, because Rachel and I pursued embryo adoption through kind of a partnership, essentially, between Snowflakes and NEDC.
Yes, it's definitely a partnership, right?
Yeah, which worked very well for us. There were also families who we interviewed who pursued it through other means. One did it through a clinic, the other did it through Facebook, basically, where she got in touch with a mother who was looking to place. That's the word. I was trying to think of the right word.
Yeah, people use different terminology.
Yeah.
So that's understandable, right?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was thinking of one term and then I was like, well, so yeah, I wanted to first talk about the technical and logistical side of things, and then to inflesh it, really, that process through these stories, so that it's not just this like dry, arid technical reading about like, do this, do this, do this, even though I do think those steps are necessary to have clear in your mind. But then you can see this is how it works out on the ground, and you see that through these different stories.
Yeah, and I think you've accomplished that. It is very readable for a layperson, for a non-technical person, and like you said, the format is varied enough. I think it keeps you interested, and you're a writer anyway, so you're able to move the narrative of these families that you talked to. What was your favorite part of writing this book?
Wow, I think my favorite part was the perspective it gave on our story overall and on how God has been at work. And it's so amusing because I was talking with my dad during this road trip about some of the things I've been struggling with. And he's like, have you even read your own book? I was like, what do you mean, Dad? He's like, you should read your own book to see what you've said, because I think it could encourage you. Because actually, during the process of writing it, it was sort of this moment of stepping back and seeing the hand of God, as it were, at work in our story, and not just our story, but these stories at large. Because I think the thing is, like, oftentimes we live in the eternal present. I think our current cultural moment encourages that, where we sort of live in this ahistorical, sort of decontextualized world. And so it's very easy to be myopic, to just be so focused on the moment and not to be able to like step back and to reflect. We don't really do that as a society. And I try to do that as an individual, but I don't do it all the time well. And so I think the process of seeing over the course of 7 years, the difficulties, the times of prayer, the times of frustration, God's faithfulness through it all was really rewarding. And then I think seeing that faithfulness also in the stories of these different families that we interviewed, I think that was probably one of the most rewarding aspects.
Was there anything that you found, an interview or a factual discovery you made as you were writing this book, that you found really surprising?
Oh, that's a good one.
Because I know you discovered a lot. I mean, you interviewed me for part. I mean, I mentioned that you have Dr. Keenan. I'm also quoted some in the book. Trust me, that's not why I'm promoting it, but I'm promoting it because
Yeah.
I think it's a good resource, not because I have anything to do with it. But you did. I mean, you asked really good questions of both us and the Snowflakes and plenty of other people. Yeah, anything that stands out is, oh gosh, that surprised me. I didn't know about that.
Yeah. I think what stuck out to me was the challenge in terms of how embryo adoption is positioned, because I think that it's very easy to position it as a fertility treatment. And
Yes.
when looking at the literature, I even encountered one book that had as its subtitle something about hope for infertile couples, which I guess I don't want to be too nitpicky, but I've always been very uncomfortable with the notion of embryo adoption as infertility treatment. While I know that there are couples, I mean, Rachel and I were one such couple who were really struggling. We really struggled. But I think that we have to avoid this instrumental approach to embryo adoption, because ultimately an instrumental approach to life is what results in all sorts of distortions and abuses. And
Yeah,
so,
and by instrumental, I think you mean also transactional.
yeah, transactional, instrumental, as in I'm doing this for this sake,
Yep.
right? As
Right.
opposed to for its own sake, right? So I'm as crude as it sounds like, and I don't know, I don't want to like try to read into things too much, but like I'm using this in order to fill this particular need. Like I think that's something that we really wanted to avoid. And I mentioned in our chapter a really good friend who posed some really, really hard questions. And I really appreciate this friend. I still really appreciate him, because even though it felt confrontational at times, but ultimately I think it only served to illuminate the need for embryo adoption. At least that's how we ended up feeling convicted. The necessary, I think, intervention that it is. I don't know if intervention is the right word. Ministry, maybe. I don't know, but I don't think we should be afraid of those hard questions. And that's why I said I don't want for embryo adoption at large to be presented in a purely sort of like happy way, like, because as one of my interviewees put it, like adoption always carries it with a brokenness, because there's a severing, there's a severance, there's a rupture, and wherever there's a rupture, there's hurt, and there has to be healing. And so I wanted to be able to kind of peel the layers back and to look at that. And so I would say, yeah, the question of how it should be positioned and how it is positioned by different organizations, how even those who have done embryo adoption conceptualize it. Like, do we view it properly? Do we view it as a ministry that God sovereignly uses to bless these children, to bless us, to grow our families? I'm like kind of reaching for words. I'm not exactly sure if I'm talking about it properly, but I just think that it's very important for us to be mindful of how we're speaking about it and how we're positioning it. That's all. I think that's something that came across.
Oh, what 100, and as the longtime marketing person for this organization, you're right. I wrestle with it. We've when I got here, and this is not to cast aspersions on anybody, we were largely clinically based in our positioning, spoke much more to embryo adoption as an infertility solution than we do now, even though our heart from the beginning has been that this is a ministry, that we're here to save these tiniest lives as God allows that. And we love that we can help out adults on both sides of the equation, the people who usually unwittingly were left, created more embryos than they were going to build their family with. And we love helping people like you who adopt the embryos and have children. But we're here first and foremost to protect the sanctity and dignity of these precious lives. And I think we've tried to move our positioning much more toward that because that's actually our heart. Yeah, it can be a blessing for people going through infertility, and the majority of people going through it are going through infertility, so that's legitimate. But you're right. That's, it is. Looking at it as an infertility treatment, full stop, is not right. A transactional approach is certainly not correct, and it's just something that we really, really have to keep in mind as we go about this. So I appreciate you bringing that to light, because there are a lot of groups that do look at it very transactionally. And we at the NEDC, by the way, right, we of course we'll post the pictures of the happy families. We like to highlight the positive aspects of it, but we've also done embryo adoption podcasts with families for whom it never worked out. They want, so it's important to be comprehensive, I guess, to not make sure, or excuse me, to not position it through rose-colored glasses. And that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that I don't know if it was part of the education we went through. It might have been, and we might have just not realized it. But I think we didn't realize how much potential there was for loss and for disappointment in terms of losing our children, really. I mean, the way I talk about it in the book is that, as I understand it, once we sign that paperwork, even though the state views it legally as property transfer, I believe that God views us as the parents now. And so we really sought to honor each of those lives. And I didn't know how hard it would be to lose one, or ultimately it was 3 before we did the twin transfer, and then it was 1 with Ian. So we lost 4 out of a set of 5. And so I think that, how do I put this? We didn't really have our hearts ready for that. I think we were thinking like, this is going to work out. We were very much focused on a particular outcome, which, thank God, Ian is sleeping. I think he's actually singing in the room down the hall. But we weren't expecting that to be the case. And so what that interview we said about adoption carrying with it brokenness and also joy, right? I mean, on the other side, there's both. There's difficulty involved in it, yet there's also, I think, a lot of joy to be had, which Ian certainly has brought into our family.
That is a very comprehensive look at the subject. And again, that is what you will get if you pick up Ezekiel Lee's book, Once Frozen, Now Family. Easy title to remember, available at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, all the places that you...
I can speak to the cover, actually.
Yeah, please do.
If you look at the top part of the cover, that image in the background is Ian as a 5-day-old blastocyst. Actually, it might be him or his twin, but I wanted to include that in the cover because, riffing off like Once Frozen, there's the pre and then Now Family, the post. I wanted to show where he came from because at the end of the day, we believe life begins at conception. And so there's a linear trajectory, and there he was, and that's how we received him. And then that's how he came to be at 9 months, and here he is with us at a year. And so I wanted to be able to show the 2 images, kind of juxtapose them together.
Amen. Well, do yourself a favor, pick up this book, or if you have a friend who's considering embryo adoption or just wants to know more about it, it's an awesome resource. And for $13, it'll be well worth it. And by the way, if you would like to check out more of Ezekiel's writing, you can do that. He's a very talented young writer. He is also a reader, which most good writers are. And you can find out more about him by going to his website, EzekielLee.com. Again, that is EzekielLee.com. Brother, congratulations on this book. Thank you so much for the resource, and congratulations on your growing family.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to the Embryo Adoption Podcast. I hope you enjoyed learning more about this life-changing option for building a family. Hey, if you or someone you know could benefit from embryo adoption or donation, visit embryodonation.org to get started or just to find out more. Again, that's embryodonation.org. And don't forget to spread the word, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast app. Join me next time as we continue sharing inspirational stories of the embryo adoption journey. And until then, take care.